Welcome to Reach, your platform to connect with other executive assistants and acquire game-changing knowledge and perspective. Reach is designed to inspire your workday, guide you through pivotal moments in your career, and transform you into the executive assistant you've always wanted to be. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Reach. This is your host, Jessica Van. I'm the founder and CEO of Maven Recruiting Group. And today we are welcoming back executive coach and co-creator of Maven's e-learning course and coaching program, the one and only Julia Quijano. Hi, Julia.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Jessica. You guys, I just cannot get enough.
Apparently. We can't get enough of you.
Oh, it's mutual. I love
it. Third time's the charm.
Fourth time.
Is this the fourth time?
This is our fourth.
Get out. Oh my gosh.
We have a lot to talk about.
It's like a never-ending, evergreen fountain. Not only that, but we just finished recording and rolling out our latest e-course together, Becoming a Strategic Partner, which, I mean, apparently we, like you said, we have not run out of things to discuss with each other yet.
That well is deep, you guys. We have a lot and a lot more coming. It's just,
more coming.
I think we really listen to the challenges that the community is facing as the market and technological paradigm shifts. So we'll keep the good info and ideas and advice coming your way.
100%. And I want to thank you. I know that you're basically broadcasting live from LA Tech Week, where I know you've been very, very busy doing double duty, hosting events and meeting with executives and job seekers and all kinds of great coaching content that's coming out of that as well. So thank you for making time in the midst of all of that mayhem.
My pleasure. It's been a lot of fun.
So as I mentioned, we just finished our second e-course, Becoming a Strategic Partner. And in furtherance to that conversation, as Julia mentioned, we wanted to do some follow-up on an emerging area that is rapidly presenting itself as yet another strategic opportunity for executive assistants to 10x their work. And that, of course, is this rapidly evolving area of AI. And we've also had a number of requests from listeners, and Julia mentioned this, that we do our best to really try to tailor our content and consider the wishes and needs of those of our listeners who write in. So we've had a number of requests from listeners to highlight this topic as an emerging area and opportunity for executive assistants. So thank you, as always, to our community for sharing those ideas. As a quick refresher before we get started, Julia is a former executive assistant turned chief of staff and currently runs her own executive development firm where she works with startup leaders across various industries. She is the co-creator and host of, as I mentioned, our now 2 e-courses and also facilitates our group and individual coaching programs. This is, oh my goodness, you're right. It's your 4th time. I lost count. This is officially her 4th time as a Reach guest. And her other episodes include what it means to be a chief of staff, how executives have also been affected by the Great Resignation, and how to set SMART goals. So definitely check those out if you haven't already. All right. So AI, here we go. As a fun exercise, I thought to kick this conversation off, Julia, I would just ask ChatGPT to respond to the prompt of how can executive assistants leverage you to be more effective? And within less than, I want to say 5 seconds, I had a bulleted list of 6 items from ChatGPT. And they included things like information retrieval to help with prep or background due diligence, task management, meeting preparation and talking points. They mentioned drafting and editing of emails and documents. It mentioned email management. And my personal favorite was problem solving and decision making. Yeah. So as you think about the utility of AutoGPT or ChatGPT in the EA role, what possibilities emerge for you?
Oh man, what a question. And I think that this is such a timely discussion. I know that, we've had some interest in this topic for a while. But especially, as I sit in LA today in the midst of Tech Week, all week long, the only thing that everybody's talking about right now is AI in all kinds of different scenarios, but that is just what is on everybody's mind. And I think it's also really timely that, we did just launch our second course on becoming a strategic partner, because, all we hear from the community so often is, how can I level up? How can I be more of a strategic partner? And we really dive deep into that in the course. But it's such, marrying kind of this idea of a strategic partner with what we're seeing in technology right now surrounding AI is really kind of where the magic is and where the possibility is. And before I even go into kind of what the different possibilities are, I think it's really important to just kind of take a beat and frame up for everybody what's happening in AI right now, and why this is so hot, and how fast the the paradigm shift is, and how fast the adoption is, and the advancements of this like broader category that we're calling AI. So I think it's just so important that we frame what's been happening in AI, and kind of the phases of development that we've been characterizing as AI, and also kind of just how fast this thing's moving. So I'm sure everybody who's kind of paying attention to the space right now, in earlier this year, there was just so much excitement around the launch of ChatGPT, and specifically GPT-3. And, GPT-3 was really blowing people's minds in, putting a prompt in, getting something out that was, pretty impressive and usable. And very quickly, I want to say maybe 4 to 6 weeks later, OpenAI launched GPT-4, which was like everybody really thought of GPT-4 as 3 on like 10x steroids, and mind blown all over again. And most of this stuff I was following on, just some of the tech podcasts that I listened to. And I literally every week, every episode, were listening to just a complete game changer. And I think 2 weeks after this GPT-4 excitement, everybody started talking about auto GPTs. So, what are those, and what are the differences? I think, I want to kind of hone in on GPT-4 versus auto GPTs really quickly. And look, I'm not an AI expert by any means, but really thinking about this in the context of assistants and executives' work. GPT-4 is really, the incredible examples of like, you put a single prompt in to ChatGPT and you ask it to write an essay in the tone of, Socrates, and it will spit something out for you that's incredible. It's thorough, it's smart, and editable. When you think about auto GPTs, that's when we start talking about not just single prompt AI, but when we start talking about AI agents and more complex tasks. And that is, and they actually ran this example, it's the difference between a single prompt asking, an AI to write you an essay for you, to putting multiple prompts in saying, hey, I am going to do some meal planning for the week. I really want to eat healthier. Can you make me a customized vegan meal plan, create a grocery list, and then actually place the order on Instacart for those ingredients to be delivered to me? That is really the power behind agents and auto GPT. So I frame it because think about from not just an EA perspective, but literally anybody, you can either keep going after the single prompt, like, okay, now write me a meal plan. Great. Now that I have the meal plan, now I'm going to ask you another prompt to, create the shopping list for me. Great. And then I have to do the next step of, ordering it on Instacart. One prompt can execute a very complex task versus one single task at a time. So when we think about the possibility of AI in an executive assistant world, we got a lot out there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if the light bulb moments were not already going off for people, I think that illustration definitely gives a lot of specific content to extrapolate from in terms of how you would use this in your executive assistant job. I mean,
And
tons.
tons. And I think the reason that I like to tie it back to, Jessica, this course the second course that we just launched around strategic partnership, now these possibilities are for you and using this and leveraging this in your work. And look, the technology is not perfect right now, but it's important to start learning and adopting this, because this is the thing that could really help you level up as a strategic partner. I hear all the time from our clients about how there's so many things that they do on a day-to-day that they can do in their sleep. And so if there are so many tasks that you can do in your sleep, those are really incredible things that potentially you could delegate to AI technology so that you can then level up to be that thinking, decision making, problem solving strategic partner to your executive, and not be bogged down by a lot of the manual, time consuming work that and what we talk about in our course is kind of the tactical tasks that you need to do to run your executive's office.
Right. I think that's a really nice segue, because I think in the same way that you as an executive assistant are here to build capacity and leverage for your executive, this AI tool or tools, because there's many of them, but they can be used to do a similar thing for yourself, to give you back the capacity and the leverage to be able to explore the higher order things that can't be relegated at this point to an AI interface. So, you mentioned the tactical and the operational. What we talk about in the course are, tactical being, for instance, put this on the calendar, or move this meeting, or schedule XYZ, or get tickets for New York for this business trip, something along those lines. It's the mechanical stuff that you do. The operational stuff that we talk about is more of the archival knowledge, the systematic knowledge, the process knowledge, being able to kind of create that archive, that knowledge archive and knowledge base. There's a lot that ChatGPT can do. ChatGPT, still hard for me to say. It's like I have to consciously slow down. There's so much that it can do to address those two parts of what we talk about as constituting strategic support. The third piece, of course, is the relational. And I don't think that there's a really good workaround at this point for how ChatGPT can advise on that part of it. I think that is still the human interface, the human connection, the knowledge, the observation, the intuition, right? Those are still you knowing who your executive is. But to the extent that you can leverage these tools to handle the first two, to help you with the tactical and the operational, it's just building more into your day so that you can then focus on the other things, including relational.
100%. Executives want a thinking partner. And there are so many things that need to be handled tactically and operationally. And imagine if you, as an executive assistant, could quite quickly onboard your own admin to help you with some of the tactical and operational stuff so that you could serve as that strategic thinking partner to your executive and think about how to oversee the work. And then, of course, Jessica, to what you mentioned, AI, and I might get in trouble for this, but as a, EQ proponent and uh, psychologist, thinking about, I could never imagine AI really replacing the human connection, the relational nuance, the trust building in a way that humans are really going to be able to feel 100% confident with. That's the piece that this technology can now make more room for you in your role.
Mm-hmm. 100%. We we had on our program another guest speaking about AI, Abe Kang. For those of you who caught his episode, he's a management consultant in the security space. So he's a security leader, but he's also a JD who does some work as well in this kind of emerging field of AI and law. And one of the things that he talked about is, thinking about what do you do currently that is high burden in terms of time investment, but low value in terms of kind of strategic work or strategic lift. And he said that pairing is a really good type of activity to find an AI solution for. And I thought that was a really nice way of kind of evaluating the work that you do and where you spend your time, and really kind of applying that lens to what you might want to explore. And it doesn't mean that you suddenly, do everything. It means try it out, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
maybe the results are great and you're like, wow, this edited version of this memo that I wrote in the style of Socrates or whatever you said. I want to write a memo in the style of Bob Dylan to the board, whatever. But try it out, right? Like, see, does it actually work? Is it doing what you need it to do? And if not, again, these are not flawless solutions. And that was the other thing that he shared, is he cautioned us as well that part of how these language models work is they use logic to populate the next thing and to anticipate. And sometimes, even when there's not the information to follow up with, it will do these. It will because it's programmed to return a solution. It will return things that aren't necessarily true or accurate, right? So that's where you get these things called like hallucinations. So it's not perfect, and you still have to apply your reasonable person lens and filter to it and fact check things, but try it, right?
And I think it's also important to remind everybody that, OpenAI, the database, the information in there is from I believe it's 2021 and earlier. So when we're thinking about the most current up-to-date information, you really have to fact check some of these things because, we're 2 years older than the data set we're working with.
Yeah, that's super important to make sure that people understand that, especially if you're using it as, briefing material to help prepare your executive for a meeting. I mean, that data is antiquated. Yeah. Okay. So we talked a little bit about some of the tasks or responsibilities that we see could be more easily or appropriately delegated. But I guess on the flip side, what do you see as some of the limitations of these AI languages in their ability to be helpful?
Yeah, well, I think, the first thing to keep in mind is that, your output is only as good as your prompts, right? It's the saying garbage in, garbage out. And I'll tell you, the first time I tried making an image with Midjourney was really the first AI interface that I really started playing with. And I thought, okay, Midjourney, like, how hard is it to make an image? And I put some prompt in, and I thought it was very specific. And I got something back so ugly. I was floored that I could actually create an image that was so bad. And it took me really practicing being very thoughtful about how I was writing the prompts, the adjectives that I was using, the adjectives that I wasn't using, to really craft and instruct this thing to give me something that I was imagining or wanting out of it. And it takes some practice. So if you put a prompt in to, do some research on flights for your executive's trip, and you get something back that is kind of garbage and not usable, then I think the first thing to actually think about is go back to your prompt. How could you be more specific? What kind of guardrails do you need to put on, or specific details and information do you need to include or omit, so that you are getting an efficient but high quality result back from it? That the power of the prompt is kind of the biggest limitation of AI being helpful or usable in your role. That's kind of first and foremost, in my opinion. But then I also think, AI sometimes, and especially right now, it's feeling a little bit like magic. And I think there's, especially when we think back to the Instacart example that I gave earlier, it sounds incredible just to be able to put a prompt in and have perfect groceries delivered to your door, and you didn't have to do much thinking or coordinating around that. And certainly didn't have to even go to the grocery store. But it's going to be dangerous, and another kind of very concrete limitation, if we think that AI can do everything for us. That, again, we're kind of users of and overseers and managers of the work product that AI executes for us. So if you're not kind of checking and validating what's coming back to you, and you almost overly trust AI to get you what you want, it's just not going to be, it's not going to help you be successful in your role, and it's not going to help you move faster with high quality work product.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I guess I'm also curious to know what concerns you might have, if any, in our increasing reliance on these platforms to communicate. And I think about, concerns about things like the dilution of human connection, and dilution of our individuality and our voice and our point of view. Because if you're going into a prompt and asking the prompt to generate, like as you mentioned, like generate an essay or whatever the case may be, it will do a brilliant job of that. I mean, I think they said now, like, the AI is, I think, 10,000 times more intelligent than the human, or something along these lines. I mean, something mind-boggling, right? So it will certainly return something impressive. But I wonder, in that, do you have any concerns about the fact that we're now not being called upon to generate these thoughts and ideas on our own? We're not engaging our brains. We're not engaging our individuality. We're not engaging our own thought and point of view, and the work that it takes to come to those types of conclusions. I mean, there's something I think very important as human beings in in that process of reflection and review and consideration to arrive at these types of essays or articles or whatever the case may be. So obviously you can hear my concerns coming out, but I'm curious if you have any concerns about what this presents and what this means for us as people.
Well, certainly, I think, for us as people, I can quite quickly start catastrophizing on how our social skills and EQ will evolve with this technology. I think there's, if anybody's seen The Social Dilemma and what some of the social the social networks have done to not only our generation but the younger generations who kind of grew up and only knew Instagram. They like even missed the whole AIM and pre text message uh, time of our lives. Yeah, I think from a macro level, I always get very, very scared about how we'll overly rely and stop flexing or stop exercising some of the muscles around what it really is that makes us human. It's, our creativity. It is our thinking. It's our critical thinking. It's our contextualizing. It's the relationship building, right? Like that's the stuff that we really need to um, double down on. And I think, there's obviously a very scary way to think about AI in that, God, maybe it will prevent us from or give us an out from exercising that muscle. At the same time, I think, there's absolutely a school of thought that says that there's no such thing as an original idea. And if there's no such thing as an original idea, then a lot of the work that we can sometimes do trying to find the what, right, is just actually more kind of time consuming and a race against who can find and craft what the what in a new and unique way. But I think the opportunity that this really presents in leveraging AI is how can you get AI to really help you fill in the what very quickly. So then us as humans thinking about our experience, our creativity, our contextualizing, our relationship building, that's when we really need to answer kind of the why and the when, if you will. So I think this really applies to the frame that we talk about in the strategic partner course. When you think about the tactical, the operational, and the strategic, AI can do a lot of the tactical and it can do some good operational pieces of it too. But if you think that your thinking and your work is done from a tactical and operational side, then you're missing this strategic piece. You're missing the nuance. You're missing how to actually craft the tactical and operational work into something that is truly tailored and original because of who you are, the experience and perspective that you bring, and how you deliver and contextualize that in your work, in the culture of your organization, in the relationship with your executive, in the different personalities that you work with, right? If you're missing that step, then yeah, we might be in real trouble because we've stopped thinking and we've stopped exercising the muscles that make us human.
Yeah. It's just not the Waldorf way, right, Julia?
It is not the Waldorf way.
It's not the Waldorf way. That's an inside joke between us.
How I went in my life from Waldorf, where you do not watch TV or look at screens growing up, to talking about AI on a podcast, I will never know.
Yeah, it's true. But I like the point that you make about really questioning, and I think this is from the little bit that I've dipped my toe into these discussions. This is a very vibrant piece of these AI discussions, is this definition of what makes us human. And I think that it all kind of comes down to that. And some people, you gave one definition of humanity, which is being able to contextualize and being nuanced and thoughtful and, the kind of the compassion and the ability to relate. But other people, define it as the ability to kind of be sentient and feeling. And I've heard some argue that we're getting to a point where these apparatuses will get to a point where they can be quote unquote sentient. And in that case, they're saying, well, is there really even a difference? So, I mean, again, it's like, it's how you define it and kind of, your rhetorical stance from that point forward. But I agree. I mean, I think it's really important not to lose sight of your individuality in the utilization of these things. And I go back to, let's just keep with the Socrates method or whatever, or the Bob Dylan. Like, at the end of the day, your boss didn't hire you because you communicate like Bob Dylan or Socrates, right?
I mean, maybe. I don't know. I don't know. There's some interesting, job qualifications out there. I'm not sure.
But if I would like to think that there was something that you conveyed, some way that you carried yourself, some way that you had of expressing yourself, or, relating to the situation or the context or input that you provided, that was unique to you. And that was the attribute or the skill set that they liked and wanted to have as part of their team. And so, to the extent that we're just diluting that point of view and just dousing it in like bleach and chlorine and just making it totally like dumbed down version of it, I think that that's really concerning. And so I think that we do run the risk of kind of, just, I guess the word that's coming to mind is diluting, diluting ourselves in all of this. So I guess, I go back to this question of, is there a trade-off between being nuanced and really, as you say, like finessed, and having that context and having that, historical context and sophistication in terms of how you strategize and how you come up with solutions. So is there a trade-off between operating in that way with a lot of nuance and finesse and of course efficiency, right? And is it still possible to be tailored and be nuanced and be thoughtful and all of these things if you're using AI to increase your efficiency as an EA? And I guess like my question to you would be, if it is possible to use AI and still be nuanced, how do you accomplish this? And how do you navigate and straddle those two sort of competing priorities?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. When we think about nuance and efficiency, I really think about those two things not necessarily at odds with each other, but truly existing on the same continuum. And, and Jessica, I think we actually have to be really real about what's going to happen and what we're going to see more of as this technology is more broadly adopted by everyone across all industries. There are going to be a lot of executives out there who really just want an AI assistant, and they're going to go pay some subscription model, and it's going to do its calendaring for them and book some travel, and we'll get there. And there will be a lot of executives who want that. And I think they'll want that because they kind of first and foremost don't fully understand the real value that comes from an executive assistant partner. They won't fully feel the need to have that incredibly intimate relationship that's built between an executive and an EA, but also because they're just banking on the efficiency play. And I think I talk a lot with our coaching clients who will sometimes say, like, my executive kind of just treats me like a resource. They don't treat me like a partner. They just want me to crank on some things like a robot. Okay, those could actually be executives who are really, really good candidates for a true AI assistant solution. And there are going to be so many more who are craving, and Jessica, you hear this from Maven clients all the time. They're craving that strategic partner who could think with them, be that sounding board, be an extension of them as a leader. And that's where, for you, finding that fit, then coming back to how do you strike balance? Not necessarily, and I know that I'm not talking about the trade-offs here, but it's about striking the balance between the nuance and the efficiency. You almost want to double down on the nuance as a strategic partner and find ways to resource yourself and your work so that you can maintain the productivity, the output, the efficiency, but really position yourself and up-level yourself as that strategic
Yeah.
gain partner.
Yeah, 100%. I think that now is the time, and I hope that our listeners are hearing this, that it's really incumbent upon you now more than ever to up level and to find ways to deliver at a strategic level if you aren't already. And I agree with you. I think that there are definitely examples of support roles that will be obliterated by these technologies. And I think a lot too about like the offshoring economy and kind of the offshore assistance solutions that have also kind of taken some of the market share. Of course, they're more cost effective, right? If you're involving an overseas admin virtual support solution. I think that was sort of one cost saving / efficiency hack that some people have gone with. But I think that now that we have these as options, that some of that kind of tactical stuff might end up being in the hands of an AI solution, right? So I feel a little bit more. I think that the tactical admin solutions in general are going to see some, rather the tactical administrative partners are going to see some consolidation as a result of this. And I think that, again, as you talked about, like that's why now more than ever, you want to ensure that you're operating from a place where you are packing some serious punch. And so that your executive can look at you and look at your partnership and say, there's no way that I could get the same return that I receive in this relationship from an AI solution, right? And I think so much of that too comes from your observational viewpoint and your observational lens. AI will never have the ability to observe the boardroom discussion. They will never have the ability to know that, so-and-so's wife was just diagnosed with breast cancer, and that's why he's been distracted in meetings, and maybe we need to think about, how do we how do we support this person, right? And maybe cutting that individual some slack, or knowing how to be mindful of relationships and what's at threat, or what's vulnerable, or what's in jeopardy, or just all of these different things, right? Or how to engage people. So there's so much that is still yours and ours, right, in terms of how we maintain our staying power. But it really, really is so important that you take this opportunity to level up. And if you feel like you're not necessarily being seen in that way at this point, or functioning in that way, it really is time, right? It's time to find the ways to develop.
And I wanna tease out that boardroom example for a second there, because I don't know about you, but every time I'm hopping on a Zoom these days, I am joined by some AI agent that looks like a new person, and they're there to take notes and observe the meeting. So we're going to have all these, AI tools that are sitting in your boardroom meetings and taking notes, and are, quote unquote, observing and recording. But they're not going to do, to your point, Jessica, the meaning making from the discussion, the nonverbal communication, the outside context, and what folks might be preoccupied with. Your little Zoom buddy or AI buddy that just hopped on Zoom with you to observe this meeting. They're not going to do that.
Right.
That's you. That's
Well,
your value.
100%. And there's a very big difference between transcription
Mm.
and observation. Those
Mhm,
are
mhm,
very, very, very different things. And I
mhm,
think that most of these tools, that's what they're doing. They're creating like a court stenographer. It's like a record.
mhm,
But I mean, some of them may be better at pulling out the agenda items and things like that.
mhm.
Um, but yeah, it's a very different thing,
Yeah.
and that's the space that you need to really flush out and exist in. Is okay in this space between transcription and observation. Like, where do I exist, and how do I make sure that I'm more on the observational partnership, active ally, active participant, collaborator? You want to make sure that those are the um, descriptors that your executive associates with you, right?
Yeah. And Jessica, this call to action that you're really putting a stake in the ground here on, like, this is the time to level up. I think, this conversation that we're having today, it's not unique to executive support. It's not unique to the startup industry. It's every single person is kind of asking themselves these questions in their own world and work. And, I kind of equate it to, I liked what you said in the very beginning of our discussion today around, like, AI can 10x your work. And there's this concept that's been floating around for a while called the 10x engineer, and thinking about how, these days AI can write code faster and probably higher quality than the majority of engineers out there right now. So you could think about this as a threat as you're an engineer, or you can think about, wow, how can now you actually do and build so much more, thinking about how to um, manage and oversee quality code and construct and architect technologies together, and in a way that what they're saying is engineers are going to now start writing more English than code, because now they're going to be these strategic leaders overseeing the AI that can just do it better and faster than they typically could before. And I encourage us to think about that in the same way, and almost borrow, what does it look like to be a 10x EA? And I think about kind of the opportunity in front of us here. This thing is kind of here to stay. It's not a trend that's going to be hot for 1 second and then disappear. A lot of people are talking about this paradigm shift in technology, very, very similar to, and I've heard two. I've heard, the World Wide Web, and I've also heard smartphones. So, and I'll go with a
Mm-hmm.
smartphone analogy for a quick second. I encourage all of our listeners right now, think about the job that you do today, and think about if you were doing your day-to-day work with the, what is it? I think I've lost track of what iPhone we're on right now, but like the, iPhone 12 or whatever we're at, or think back to like playing Snake on your Nokia. Imagine doing your job on a Nokia. Eventually, AI is going to be so even more integrated with our world and our work that if you don't start even just exploring it over the next, couple of years, you may find yourself in your role stuck with a Nokia when the rest of the world and the rest of your peers have bought the iPhone.
So, given all of this, Julia, do you think that there's sort of a veiled threat here, or do you think that there's anything that our listeners should feel concerned about?
You know, my honest opinion here is the only thing the only folks who feel threatened is those who want to ignore this or kind of keep status quo. And if you want to keep status quo, our world always evolves, especially our technology. Where we were 10 years ago is so different from where we are today. Even, I'm learning new technologies all day long to just keep up with my innovating clients. That's just kind of part of what it means to be, a professional in our current day and age. But if you find yourself feeling threatened by some of the tactical stuff that AI could handle for you in your role, if you feel kind of resistant to evolution and really want to double down on the status quo, I would just really encourage everybody to think about their why, right? Like, why, what is it that you love about your role? Why is it that you pursued the executive support path at whatever point in your career that you did? What have you loved about it? I'm not sure that I have heard, and certainly from my own experience, for me, it wasn't, going down an endless Google search to try to figure out what the best flight was. It was, being in meetings and having these really incredible conversations with my executive to problem solve something with them and to truly make impact in a helpful way that allowed me to kind of try and experiment and grow in my human form, not just my kind of manual execution skill set. So, you know, usually, um, if we're resisting something or scared of something, there's it's just an opportunity to think about our why and what do we love about this and what is it that we want to continue.
I think there's something really important to understand in when you're talking about the why, Julia, and and also not being adverse to change and to growth and to learning in your role. Because I go back to no matter how you prompt AI, you can never prompt it to have the full extent of the context that you as the employee have, right? You can query and you can get really creative and thoughtful and clever with how you prompt it, but you cannot, there's no way. If you've been supporting a CEO and you've been through thick and thin and you've been in war rooms together and you've been through, you know, data leaks together and security breaches together and an IPO together, and you've seen executive teams dissolve and reform and product vulnerabilities and sensitivities in between one organization and another. I mean, there's so much context that you have that allows you to function in your role, and there's no prompt, no matter how clever you get, that can really capture all of that, right? You can narrowly capture some of it and you can say given X, Y, and Z, but it can't. It doesn't have the archival and historical organizational knowledge that you have. And so I think like you encourage, Julia, don't be threatened. Rather embrace it, get curious, but also don't lose sight of your value and make sure, as we've encouraged in this podcast really since our inception, 3 or so years ago, is find ways to contribute and find your voice in your organization and how to get up to speed. And I think that was actually, I want to say, in our very first conversation, Julia, like we talk about what resources to avail yourself to learn the priorities of the organization, to understand what the P0s and P1s are and all of those things. We've always been campaigning for this, and I think now more than ever is that reality is that much more present. But because of all of that, I don't see it as this sort of threat. I do see it as complementary. I still see it as complementary, provided that you are really taking full advantage of of the opportunities that your role affords as a strategic partner. That I think that's kind of for me where the rubber meets the road with this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um,
I mean,
yeah.
and really it makes me, as I kind of suggest to our listeners to think about their why, it reminds me of ours, Jessica, right? That not only this episode, but the courses, the coaching, it's, we're working so hard to not only stay up to date with everything that's happening around this role, but also creating the resources, and sorry for the shameless plug, everybody, but really it's we so I've lived the role. I've lived the growth from the role into other things. I so value the role, or the impact that this role delivers. We are working so hard to advocate on behalf of what we really know this role, and all of you bright, capable listeners can do in this role, that we constantly want to make sure that we're feeding you the information, the support, the resources, so that you can do whatever you want in this role, and really craft it in a way that exemplifies and amplifies you and your most highest, best, unique skill set. So it's just reminding me, Jessica, of why
Mm-hmm.
we keep coming back and talking about
Mm-hmm.
some of these things.
Why the well is so deep.
Why it's
Yes.
so deep.
Yeah, 100%. So for those that haven't yet dabbled in AI, what are some of the applications or interfaces that you would recommend they play around with?
Yeah, I think for Midjourney for images, definitely the most fun. Guys, also remember that you will likely have to pay a subscription for some of these things. So just keep your eye out. There are free trials for some, but everybody's making some money off of the many apps out there. But Midjourney is super fun to play with. It both kind of, if you haven't looked into Discord yet, it forces you to get familiar with Discord as a platform, and then really guides you through how to prompt images, and gives you lots of good kind of trial and error for creating some of those things. I also really like Poe, Poe. Poe is a text app that was actually created by Quora, and um, and and that's a great way to do kind of single text or single prompt uh, tasks. I'm also, for all of you on Instagram, I I really can't keep up with all the new emerging AI apps and technologies out there. So I actually started following an Instagram account called AI Revolution. I think their handle is AI the Revolution. And I follow them all. They're constantly looking at and evaluating all the different apps out there. And that's how I'm learning all the new stuff in real time myself. So, easy to scroll through things and just get exposure. So highly recommend to follow there.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. And I will say we had a guest on our program as well. She's the chief of staff at Rewind, and they also have an interesting interface that our users may be interested to explore at the corporate level. I would say it's really more of a B2B type of a solution, but definitely very interesting. A lot of interesting features to that. So I guess kind of in closing, I think one thing that we haven't really touched on are some of the inherent security risks or potential for information leaks. And I think about how much confidential information our EAs come into contact with in their roles, and that information could potentially find its way into one of these um, prompts. So I'm curious, if you have any thoughts about safeguards and things that people should put into place to keep their company's information safe and secure.
Yeah, I think it's a really important call out. I'll first say that I'm not even anywhere near, but know what's happening around a lot of the discussion and debate um, involved in regulating AI right now. So it's super hot this week in LA during Tech Week. It's on every single podcast right now talking about talking about AI rather, because we are going to have to figure out what the bounds are to this thing, how to use it responsibly, especially when, there are folks who have access to really important, confidential, sensitive information at the end of the day, right? It's data. So how do we think about that? From an EA perspective, we are keepers of confidential information. So I will always, always, always say err on the side of caution. I think, when thinking about something like, populating a presentation for the board, there's so many AI apps out there right now. I'm sure there's going to be some corrupt ones at some point. So it's going to be important to leverage a lot of these tools for think about frameworks and roadmaps and structure to a deck and an overall, arch and narrative that you can then use as a skeleton to then populate off of some of these apps that are kind of secure and maintain confidentiality. Populate the data after you've kind of gotten the bare bones of a framework or a structure. I will also say that, for many of you, I'm sure you work in organizations with very, very robust cybersecurity and IT departments. And I promise you, they're all working diligently to figure out how to best guide the organization and employees on how to use some of this technology. So, when in doubt, go ask your IT and security teams. They're keeping up with this stuff as much as anybody else, if not more.
Yeah, I agree. And yet I also think that it is there's a lot of catch up right now, and there's a lot that's unknown. And, if you do work for one of these larger organizations that's fortunate enough to have like a head of InfoSec or whatever, or a CISO, like awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of our listeners that might be in like a Series A or Series B startup or a smaller, professional services company or venture capital firm or what have you that might not have those same tools. So I do think it's at least be aware enough to know, hey, there are risks to using this, and ask the questions, and don't be the one that's caught unawares thinking that, oh, this is totally safe and secure. And then, come to find out that some massive leak has occurred as a result of your actions, right? So I think know enough to know that you should be cautious, and also that there are resources out there. And I mentioned this earlier in our program, but the podcast with Abe Kang, he works for a company called Include Security, and that's something that they can do is advise on security policies and kind of how to manage these protocols and creating even a protocol for your organization. So, as an EA, I think it's, again, goes back to being strategic, like making sure that these things are on the radar of your leadership team. If it's not, and if you identify that it's not and should be, it's worth kind of ringing the bell on and getting some attention on it.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, Julia, number 4.
Number 4, no shortage of things to chat about.
No
I'm sure
of things.
Many more to come.
Yeah. And do you want to share with our listeners as well the best way to get in touch with you and or us regarding coaching curiosity, or even just our e-course if they are interested in looking into, particularly, we talked a lot today about the second course, but do you want to maybe share how they can do that?
Yeah, we have lots of good information and an overview of all the different coaching packages and courses that we offer on the Maven website. So if you go to mavenrec.com and navigate to the Reach section, where you can also find some past podcast episodes, you can navigate to our e-courses. The direct website link there is courses.mavenrec.com. Check that out. You can also check out more about me, juliaquijano.com, and then email me at julia@juliaquijano.com. Pretty easy there.
Yes. And we are currently taking signups for our group coaching cohort, which will be in September of this year. But we also offer ongoing individual coaching if you're looking for one-on-one support, specifically with Julia.
Yeah, so. And we keep your eye out too. I think there might be a promo code for group that's live right now, but we periodically like to give some good sweeteners and some deals for you guys. So keep your eye out. Follow on LinkedIn, on Instagram. That's where we usually post all the good stuff.
All the good stuff. Yes. 100%. Thank you, Julia. This has been amazing, as always.
As always, Jessica, thanks so much for having me. It's always a good chat.
Reach is brought to you by Maven Recruiting Group, who specializes in placing executive assistants and support staff to the Bay Area's most prominent executives and companies. If you've enjoyed being part of our podcast community and are interested in becoming part of our candidate community, we're currently hiring for roles in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, and Los Angeles. You can visit us at www.mavenrec.com to see some of the roles we're currently working on and to submit your resume.